Hi everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be using the Chunky Hearts panel die from Simons Stamp along with the Ink Drops Vivid 6x6 pad from Craft Consortium. I'm going to be making a repeated heart pattern card. It's very simple design, but it has these beautiful papers, and I'm planning to make all of the hearts super glossy, and I'm going to show you how you can keep all the hearts in perfect formation and position and create some dimension on your card as well. So the first thing I did was I took an A2 piece of cardstock. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which is my finished card size, and I've centered that heart die right on that cardstock and run it through my die cutting machine. I'm going to use this as a template while I create my cards. This white cardstock will actually not even be on my final card. So I took my die and I cut the pattern paper, and I'm going to keep those hearts in the exact positions where they are when I cut them. That's because I wanted to kind of have that continuous pattern going through and kind of have where those colors are shifting. So in order to keep them in the same position while I adhere them to my card front, I'm going to take some Glad Press and Seal wrap. This is available in the Simons Stamp store. And I'm going to put that face up on my work surface and then put my white template face down right onto that. Press and Seal is a very light, tacky plastic. So as I place these hearts inside the little gaps, almost like puzzle pieces, as I place them in, they're going to all kind of stick together. I've put one little foam square on the back of each heart, and I'm placing them into their specific areas. I want all of the hearts to match up with pattern, like I mentioned before. So I'm really making sure that all of those hearts are in the right positions. In fact, one way you can check to make sure they're in the right position is just keep that original pattern paper you cut the hearts out of and turn it over and compare on the back. So I've got my card base here. I've got the heart piece in the corner of my SCOR-BUDDY, and then I'm going to line up the corner in the SCOR-BUDDY and press it down onto all of those hearts. And then when I lift it up, I can take off that press and seal. All those hearts are still there, but I need to take off my white template. So I'm going to kind of press the hearts with my fingers as I pull up on that template. And then I'm left with all of these hearts on foam squares, perfectly positioned. Looks like I forgot to take the release paper off of one of those foam squares. So I'm going to place my template back over the top just momentarily while I get my heart positioned just right. For those of us who are a little bit of perfectionists and want to make sure that we get all of our die cuts lined up just perfectly, this is a great method for adhering all of those die cuts. I'm going to peel off that template, and then I'm going to move on to another card. I decided I wanted to cut out these hearts out of different colors of that pattern paper. So here's the other set. And this time when I ran it through my die cutting machine and removed the die, all of the hearts stayed in place, which made it even easier for when it came to keeping them in the right position for the template. So once again, I pressed those hearts down and removed the outer area. And this just makes it super easy to move those hearts over to my white template. So as I moved each one over, I put one foam square on the back, just like I did on my first card. And you'll notice here in a minute that I do get a couple of the hearts mixed up, but I'm going to use my pattern paper to compare and make sure that I have them in the right position because it just didn't look right. So I'm going to bring this over. Yep, it's wrong. So I just swapped those hearts back, and now they're in the right position. I'm going to compare that one more time, and you can see that the colors look just perfect. So now I'm putting that right into the corner of my Scor-Pal and putting my prepared card base right over the top. Now, if you wanted to leave these cards as is at this point, you definitely could. I think it's really beautiful and impactful to have all of these popped up hearts on a card front, but I could not leave it alone. I wanted to make them glossy and shine. So I grabbed some Ranger Glossy Accents and I applied a pretty thick coat of glossy accents over every single heart. Now, sometimes when you use glossy accents, you might get some bubbles when you're applying it to your project. I've got those 3 bubbles or 4 bubbles right there on this first heart. No worries. Go ahead and keep working on your project. Glossy accents takes quite a bit of time to dry, so you will have the opportunity to come back and pop those bubbles. I'm using a craft pick from Tim Holtz, and I'm just kind of bugging those bubbles and kind of coming down and poking them, and it pops the bubbles in the glossy accents. And then you'll get a nice, clean application of all of the glossy accents. I continued on to the second card, and at one point I started holding the bottle a little bit differently. I was able to use a little bit more pressure on my hand, and my hand was getting tired. So I set these aside to dry, actually walked away for quite a few hours, went out to dinner for my anniversary with my husband, came back later to see what they would look like. And I was anticipating that the corners of the hearts might curl up, and sure enough, they did. As I tip this on the side here, you'll see that those hearts started to curl up. Now, it's not a huge deal. I think these still look great. They're nice and glossy and really pretty. But there were a couple of things that bugged me. You could see that on the card on the left, the shadow has a yellow tint. That's because of the color of the pattern paper on the back. And then also I didn't like that they were curling. So you know what? I'm going to make these again, and I'm going to change my methods for how I put it together, and hopefully it will work out better. So this time I used those same pattern papers, but I adhered them to white cardstock. And I just used a full back adhesive that goes on the back of the pattern paper. There are quite a few different adhesives that you could use for this in particular in the Simon Says Stamp store. I'll link to a few down below in the supplies. But you could definitely use the micro dot sheets from Simon, or there's some other types of adhesives you could use, kind of like full sheet adhesives. But basically, I just have that pattern paper adhered to white cardstock. So once I die cut that, I left the hearts kind of on my die cutting sandwich. I put the template right on top, and then I put the press and seal on top. This was just a different method of getting all those hearts in the right areas. And it worked out really, really quick this time. So after I had them all together, they weren't perfectly puzzle pieced into the white template. So then I picked them up and kind of moved them into the correct spot. And then I set this aside while I die cut the second piece of pattern paper. Now, this one seemed to all stay together, like even with the outer piece. So I decided to just take some press and seal and put that directly over the top. It was already staying together, and I only had one white template to work with, and it was already with the other pattern paper. So I just used another piece of Glad press and seal to hold this all in place. And I'll set that aside while I work on the first one. So now I'm applying some foam squares to the back of the hearts. But if you remember on that first version of these cards, I only applied a foam square in the center of each heart. And it seemed like when I applied the glossy accents, that the areas where there was not foam adhesive underneath, those were the areas that curled up. So I decided to do 3 foam squares on each heart. I put 1 in each bump of the heart, and then the third in the bottom V shape of the heart. I kept them all in the template while I removed the release paper, and then I put that into the corner of my Scor-BUDDY once again, and then put my card base right on top. This was an even faster application in comparison to the first time I made these cards. So if you wanted to mass produce cards like this, I would recommend this particular method for adhering everything. I think it worked out beautifully. I'm going to turn this over and peel off that press and seal. And just like I did the first time around making these cards, it was easier to pull off the press and seal first, and then pull off the white template. So as you can see, this one looks exactly like the first card. or the first round of cards before I applied the glossy accents. So I just peeled off that template. So now I'm going to move on to the second card. And if you remember, I had some Glad Press and Seal holding the hearts inside the area that was die cut. So in order to still use the white template for positioning and all that, I'm actually going to cut down this pattern paper just so it's smaller than the A2 template that I'll be using. And this will make more sense in a minute here. I just wanted to make sure that I wouldn't have any areas that wouldn't allow it to be centered. So I applied those foam squares, and then I'm taking the white template and getting that right on top, and then I can push all of it together into the corner of my Scor-BUDDY. I removed all the release papers, and then I just had to take my card base and line it up in that corner and press it down on top of all of those exposed foam squares. So once again, this card came together even quicker than the first time around. So I'm first going to peel up the pattern paper negative area, and then I can just peel up the white template. And that was just to get it positioned on this in the center of my card base. So I'll just peel this up. This was a little harder since I had all like 2 layers of this on top. Okay, so now we're back to where I was before with the glossy accents. Once again, I squeezed out that glossy accents over all of the hearts, making sure I coated each one really well. And in particular, I was very nervous about leaving these to dry because I wasn't sure if they would curl up again or not. So while I set these aside to dry, I decided, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just finish the first 2 cards. Even though they weren't perfect, I still wanted to finish them because they were pretty cute. So I'm going to use the Tiny Words Birthday stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to heat emboss them, these greetings, on some Hero Arts Pitch Black cardstock. I positioned my greeting at the top of my black panel of cardstock. I'll prep that with an anti-static powder tool, and then use Versamark ink to stamp my greeting. Versamark is my preferred ink for heat embossing because it's nice and sticky and it doesn't dry too quickly. Since I've got 4 cards to work with today, so I need 4 greetings, I decided to just leave that stamp on the door of my MISTI, rotate my black cardstock, and then stamp for a second time. So I now have 2 greetings on this one piece of black cardstock. And it was positioned perfectly on the edge of the black cardstock, so I can just maximize usage of that greeting. I applied some alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and then I heat set that until it was smooth and melted. Now for the other 2 greetings, I'm going to flip my cardstock over, and I'll just stamp on the back because it's the opposite corners. So I'll prep that area with an anti-static powder tool once again, stamp my greeting in Versamark ink, and then rotate my cardstock. So I'm doing the exact same steps for this heat embossing as I did on the other side of the cardstock. So this is going to give me 4 greetings, but I'll only need to cut out 2 lines of cardstock. That'll make more sense here in a minute. I applied more alabaster embossing powder, and I heat set that until both were smooth and melted. So now I'm going to grab my Tim Holtz and Tonic mini trimmer, and I'm going to put that up in the top of the trimmer, get it positioned just right, and then cut down for this tiny sentiment strip. And now I've got 1 sentiment on one side and the other sentiment on the other side. So these are positioned just right for cutting off the right edge, the right side on the greeting, leaving the left side to create a tag. So I'm just cutting off the right side on each one of these. And then I'm going to use the larger space on the left, and I'm going to use a hole punch to punch a small hole, and then these will be tags. So to get the hole from the hole punch positioned just right, I used my pencil and I put a little mark where I want the center of each hole punch to be. And then I grabbed my 1/8 inch hole punch. I think this is from EK Success. I'm hoping it's still available. I've had it for many years. If it is still available, I will link to it down below. And if not, I'll find a different hole punch to link to. So all of these tags are ready to go. I've taken some white embroidery floss and tied it vertically onto my card. And then I put a little tiny foam square behind the greeting, and that just stuck down to one of the hearts. And then I tied my embroidery floss into a bow. Kind of looks a little bit like a present. I thought it would go perfectly with that greeting. So here are the first two cards completed and finished. I think they look really, really great. Now you can really see the yellow shadow from that reflected yellow cardstock on the bottom of these hearts. And on this one, the other one, it's nice and colorful. The shadow's pretty neutral, but you do have all those curled up edges. So here's what the second round looks like. They dried completely flat. I think having the extra stability of the cardstock, plus the addition of 3 foam squares instead of 2, or 1 actually, so 2 more foam squares for a total of 3, I think that's all it really needed. So I grabbed some more embroidery floss, wrapped that around the cards, and tied on my tags. So here are the finished cards with the best method that I discovered for creating these glossy repeated heart die cuts. Thanks so much for watching today. Just a reminder that all of the supplies that I used today are listed down below in the video description. And thanks so much for watching. I will catch you guys in another video very soon.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.